What do you make of the market today?
Dan, look, certainly a positive one to end on, but it was actually quite a choppy session, which was similar to what we did see in the US. Obviously, this morning, starting off in positive territory, it seemed like we did shrug off a lot of those negative leads that came across and, of course, some of that disappointing data. Then at about 2 p.m, we actually did see a turnaround in the market and we actually slipped into negative territory. We were seeing a bit of weakness around the region coming out of Japan, but, of course, those light volumes really not helping out. We only saw about $2.4 billion going through in the end, but coming into the late afternoon trade, we then did pick up that momentum again, closing in positive territory, up about 0.3% for the day. If we have a look across in the US, we did see the energy stocks and, of course, some of those high-yielding stocks really outperforming, and that offset some of the losses in those consumer-related stocks, and that's actually similarly to what we did see on our market today. That utility sector was the best performer, followed by energy, property, and, of course, healthcare as well, and that falling Aussie dollar really is continuing to support some of those sectors. If we look at the worst performers being the consumer discretionary and, of course, the staples sector, potentially ahead of that retail sales data that we do have coming out on Friday. But overall, a positive one. We have started 2015 in positive territory. We are up about 0.7% over the last 2 days of 2015, so hoping that that will actually continue for the rest of the week.
Of course, we have Rio in focus today. More talk of buyback, more speculation. What does it mean for the stock and, more importantly, the sector overall?
Dan, we actually did see Rio having a pretty strong performance in the end, closing up about 0.3%. It actually did outperform BHP, which closed down about 0.2%. Of course, we saw iron ore falling off slightly overnight, but I think we did see it being offset, of course, by this by this buyback speculation. I think now, you know, there are some reports that potentially next month they will come through with about $4 billion worth of buybacks, potentially as part of their strategy to increase their dividends by about 10 to 15% or so, and that's certainly in line with what we have heard out from their Investor Day recently at the end of November, early December. Some of those key themes, of course, being cost cutting, cutting their capex, remaining focused on delivering a lot of production growth, but of course one of the main ones being remaining committed in terms of delivering or materially increasing shareholder returns coming into 2015. I think 2014 really was about debt reduction for the company, and now 2015 is going to be about returning that excess capital to shareholders. So I think that there is probably now quite a bit of pressure on Rio to actually deliver on some of their promises. They are targeting a gearing range of about 20 to 30%, as we know. At the end of June 2014, it was about 22%, and we know they are remaining focused in terms of keeping it at the lower end of that range. So it will certainly be interesting. There's a lot of speculation out there at the moment. On some of our analysis, we actually believe that if there is a working capital release of about $1 billion, potentially if we do see that gearing increasing to around 25% or so, we might only see a buyback coming through of about $2.5 billion, so well below that $4 billion that is being speculated at this stage. But I do think that given the fact we're starting to see this iron ore price stabilising, I think that a buyback is starting to look highly likely, and obviously that will continue to support the share price and will certainly please investors. So I think it will continue to remain in focus until February, when we do hear further out from the company.
The other big interesting moves today, of course, the appointment John Sutton to the as CEO of Bank of Queensland. Leanne, one for you first of all. What do you make of the appointment? Obviously, not the textbook example of succession planning. I guess it's been raised late this afternoon.
Dan, look, I certainly think it does look positive, although we did see the share price under a little bit of pressure. Didn't see too much of a movement, but I think that was given the fact that it was probably no surprise, really. We know that he has been standing in as acting CEO over the last 4 months or so, given Stuart Grimshaw's departure around September. So potentially may have been an expectation that he would actually resume the role of CEO. In our view, we do actually remain very confident in Mr Sutton's ability in terms of leading the next phase of growth within the bank, given that obviously he's had extensive experience across the financial services industry and, of course, within retail and business banking as well. So we know that he's been involved with a number of key projects and, of course, done a very good job in terms of communicating to investors over the last few months or so. We know that they came out with a very strong full-year result back in October, and, of course, in November coming out with that AGM, where we actually did see some fairly bullish commentary coming from him him in terms of some of those underlying fundamentals really remaining on track and heading in the right direction. So I do think it has provided a good start, and we certainly do remain confident in him continuing to deliver growth for the stock. We do remain very confident in terms of the outlook, in terms of obviously very highly leveraged to any recovery on the East Coast coming out of the Queensland economy, in terms of those rising house prices, also expecting that they will comfortably be able to meet a lot of their internal management targets, and also their very strong balance sheet. They are very well provisioned and well capitalised in terms of any changes that may in fact come out of that financial inquiry. So certainly remained very positive in terms of the underlying fundamentals, and do believe that Mr Sutton will in fact continue to deliver on some of that momentum.
Michael.